Hello, thanks for joining me today. My name is Eve Vitale and I work at the SPE Foundation. And today we're going to talk about think big, start small, and stay in for the long haul. What we do at the SPE Foundation is support workforce development in the plastics industry throughout the whole value chain. And we've also made a commitment to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And what we do at the foundation is to help support workforce development in the plastics industry throughout the whole value chain. And we've also made a commitment to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Now, I'm also a working engineer in plastic sustainability, the wife of an engineer. My daughter is an engineer, and so many of my friends and colleagues are engineers, scientists, and manufacturing professionals. So I'm no stranger to the lack of diversity in our profession. I remember clearly being the only or one of a very few females in my upper level engineering classes in the 80s. At the time, it didn't intimidate me. I was comfortable with it. But when I started working at one of the big three automotive companies in Detroit, being a girl didn't always serve me well with the mostly male older engineers. One day, I was sitting at my desk, a young engineering intern, when another engineer sat down at the desk next to me. He was new to our group and was probably twice my age, but much younger than I am now. He immediately asks, "What are you doing here?" By here, he meant the powertrain group. As an intern, I had requested to work in powertrain on engines because I like to wrench on my own car. I told him my responsibilities included running durability testing on the engines, and I was so excited to be part of the team. He looked at me over his container of yogurt he was eating, and between lazy bites, he declared, or maybe in his eyes decreed, "You should be in seating. That way you can pick fabrics, and that should make you happy." Apparently, this man whom I had never met knew what was best for me in my career because I was a young woman. That's some real mansplaining there. I know, but that's where we were then. We have made some progress, but the truth is we have a long way to go, and we have a very long way to go to make our workforce truly inclusive to everyone. But I really feel as if that's one of the ways we're going to solve our workforce issues. Now I understand. It's a struggle for all of us. People tell me all day, every day, that they're just trying to fill the seats. They're looking out at their aging workforce. They're trying to find qualified people, but they don't even know where to look. And the problem doesn't seem to be going away. In one way or another, I've been tackling workforce development in engineering for over a dozen years, trying to fill that pipeline with women and underrepresented minorities. There are many times when I'm so excited by the work, and then there are times when I'm exhausted by the battle, as I'm sure you have been. So today, I'm going to share with you how each and every one of you, whether you're a manager of an engineering team, or the owner of a plastics company, or an HR professional who perhaps has been charged with adding qualified personnel, how you can find the avenues and come up with ideas that will help you build a diverse workforce that makes everyone feel valued and included. And this will positively impact your bottom line over time. I can practically guarantee it because the research and the data show that that is true. And what I'm talking about here, and this takes time, is adopting a game plan that requires you to think big, but start small and stay in for the long haul. That's your game plan. That's our game plan. So the first part of the game plan is to think big. So let's start with that. Big thinking begins with dreaming, and who doesn't like to dream? Sometimes it's a dream of a sunny beach and a refreshing beverage, but today we'll settle for workforce development. It begins with allowing yourself to imagine for a moment your best possible outcome. It's daunting, I know, but you have to ask yourself a few questions. What would it be like if I didn't have to struggle to replace my aging out workforce? If I had a waiting list of qualified people who wanted to work for my company? If I knew where I could look for people who could do the job and who wanted to do the job? So, How do we get from this dreaming big to reality? Well, the answer is we start small. Not very exciting, not as exciting as our big dreams, but it works eventually. What if I did something or one small thing today that could make a difference, that could move my dream forward? And honestly, what is that one small thing? To answer that, I'm going to encourage you to look in unlikely places for ideas and solutions and people you can connect with to make your dreams a reality. I have a business colleague with whom I've worked on several recycling projects. Some were for materials that no one knew what to do with, and industry was landfilling tens of millions of pounds of this stuff every year. My colleague is a 6'8" Marine, and when he was done with his tour of duty, he became a very celebrated chef in Vermont. Eventually, he found his way home to Pennsylvania and started working for his father's company at TPEI, a continuous mixer company. He had been raised in the plant, which was a burned out dairy barn that had been refurbished and converted to a manufacturing space. Well, he had started working there as a very small lad, sorting plastic for recycling. And now he does all of the material research and development for customers in the lab housed in the mezzanine of that barn. And why is this important, you might ask? Well, we were recently talking about the shortage of manufacturing workforce. And he said, you may want to look no further than unemployed cooks, which unfortunately there are a lot of these days due to COVID and the number of restaurants that have closed for good. I asked him to expound on that idea. And he said, well, here's why. Cooks have to pay attention to detail. They have to be and stay organized. They are good with repetition. They develop systems to set themselves up for success. Most of the time, when something goes wrong, whether it's a shortage of materials or an equipment failure, they have to figure out a fix in a hurry because people are not going to wait for their dinner. They become inventive and innovative, even with money and time constraints. And honestly, while we were talking, I thought cook sounded like a match made in heaven for manufacturing workforce. Some of the work that Mr. Altenberg has done is moving the stinkiest material known in the automotive industry, paint sludge. That material had stumped processing folks for years. After much failure at transforming this crud to gold, this Marine turned chef turned material development engineer brought his kitchen appliances into the lab because food processing and polymer processing can look an awful lot alike. And we found success, much to the good-natured chagrin of his wife, since those appliances would not be making their way back to their kitchen. So this is a good example of how to look for help in unusual places. You could be surprised. Who would have thought this chef would use his skills to solve what had been deemed unsolvable by the many scientists and engineers who came before him? I also encourage you to use the constraints and problems that the pandemic or anything has created to move your business forward. And I know this is easier said than done, but just a small motion forward, thinking about one thing you could do will make a difference if repeated and then repeated again. The SPE Foundation, as you may or may not know, manages the Plastivan program, which is crafted to be an exciting one-day in-class experience for students in the 4th through 12th grades in plastics education. We aim to change the perception of plastics one classroom at a time, and we're very successful at that. I've personally been in front of thousands of students around the country, and it's exciting to see the aha moment for them when they understand how important and ubiquitous plastics are in their modern lives and how many career opportunities there are up and down the value chain. But when they question the viability of a world with plastics, we engage them in tough conversations about the issues our global society has with plastic waste. It's what they hear in the news, at home, and in school. And finally, after educating them on all of the work we're doing in the industry to combat marine debris and recycling issues, we invite them to help us solve our problems, leaving them hopeful and wondering. In 2020, the Plastivan program was on track to serve over 40,000 students in the US, up from 26,000 in 2019. And then, the big and then. So when we could no longer get in the classroom safely, we decided to use the situation to our benefit. Our need to shift virtual resources forced or maybe allowed us to take the time to produce 22 Plastivideo modules for students and teachers struggling with virtual instruction. This was done with the generous support of many of our donors. It also unexpectedly allowed us the space to begin thinking more comprehensively about the plastics workforce issues many of us were having. During the development phase of these videos, we thought about some of the big issues and created some strategy that allowed us to continue and expand our important educational work. We knew that the plastics industry was struggling with workforce, and with some self-reflection and some needed education about racial diversity, we realized that we were not necessarily creating equitable opportunities for Black, Indigenous, or students of color to investigate and have meaningful interactions with us, the collective us, the plastics industry. This is the SPE Foundation's mission, so we felt obligated to fulfill it. This big ideal, this big goal that the plastics industry could solve its issues by creating a diverse and inclusive workforce seemed insurmountable. But with one small idea, one small step, which in our case was to find a community partner with STEM expertise who was already serving students of color, our program took on a life of its own. Do you remember earlier I asked you to consider, what if I did one small thing today that could make a difference? And what is that one small thing? I'll make a suggestion. Understanding that your game plan is the long haul, find that community partner who knows the demographic of the folks you want to bring into your business. If you want to talk to students in high school, find a partner that works with your local high school students, or cultivate relationships with school counselors, STEM teachers, first robotic leaders. If you think returning veterans might be a good fit for your manufacturing plant, work with local veteran organizations and then determine their needs and work to make your business culture one that serves them. Once you do that, they will work for you. You get the picture, right? What if you know that young single mothers in your community need a living wage? Can you find a way to make daycare accessible and affordable for them so they can become a valued part of your team? Here's our story, but I want you to think about how this could be your story too. By partnering with us or by using our template to create your own success. Thanks to a colleague's introduction, I was soon working with Mr. Keith Young of Ecotech Science at Work Lab. Mr. Young has 16 years experience working with African American students in Detroit, Michigan, and has invested considerable personal resources to create equitable science experiences for his students. Students with a keen interest and who are willing to work hard are allowed access to Ecotech's lab for material science research. The average tenure of one of his students is 6 to 8 years in the lab, starting as early as 4th grade, and all of them go on to college. For us, this was an opportunity to create plastics education programs that would truly make a difference to under-resourced and underserved students. We would start in Detroit with a 10-year plan, the long haul, and high hopes. There's that dream that we could create a reliable pipeline of Black polymer scientists and plastics engineers. Mr. Young, Keith, and I put our heads together and spent many hours developing the interaction and programming and engagement we thought would be needed to support ongoing polymer and plastics experiences for those Detroit students. He told me that the students he works with have no idea that the plastics industry even exists, let alone that it could be a good opportunity for them if they're interested in material science. That's what the Plastivan and SPE are good at. So we have mainly targeted 6th through 12th graders with programs that serve their needs. Our Plastivan educators, all white, mostly middle-aged, had noted for several years that we were not necessarily credible messengers for students of color about how to succeed in our industry. So we hired Black Plastivan educators who came from the targeted schools in Detroit. Young Black children need to hear from someone who looks like them. After one of our Plasta video days at Glazer Academy, the principal remarked, "Your program gave a different look at science and allowed our students to see where they could realistically go. And that's because they saw Plastivan educators who had been in their same seats, and they saw that the possibilities were truly their own." Currently, many plastics educational opportunities for middle and high school students are single touch or are viewed with a "what do I get out of it" mentality. Will our one-time investment in this scholarship or this Plastivan Day result in a plastics professional? Well, maybe, maybe not, but assuredly not for students in Detroit. It will take multiple engagements over many years to develop that reliable workforce pipeline. So for this program, we're asking for a different mindset from the SPE Foundation and its partners. We are creating equity for these students with our investment and expecting and getting success with strong KPIs that are measured and tracked. Typically, students get a single day of plastics education when Plastivan visits during their science class. And here's a story that may illustrate why that model of one and done plastics education won't work for our Detroit students. Earlier this spring, Mr. Young got a frantic email. It was someone who knew about his success with African American students and STEM education, and they wanted access to those students. The email came with fireworks and exclamation points. "We need your students today, if possible. Please send me any students who are seniors in your program and who have at least a 3.6 GPA and a 1200 on the SAT. We have to fill spots in our program immediately." More exclamation points. You might be thinking, wow, this could be a wonderful opportunity. Mr. Young didn't think so when he pushed the delete button. "What?" I asked. "Why would you delete the opportunity without even asking your students, who, by the way, score an average 1450 on the SAT? Because," he said, "it was ridiculous that someone assumed that his very talented and bright senior students didn't already have their college opportunities and scholarships lined up. The seniors in his program had already been recruited. He told me that if we want to give students the opportunity to embrace the plastics industry, then we need to invest in them earlier and often, not swoop in at the last moment when we haven't invested in them at all." This story illustrates that young students with a strong interest and aptitude for STEM have many opportunities, and we want the plastics industry and all of the wonders of polymer science and plastics engineering, design, and innovation to grab and hold their attention. That is only possible through repetition and guidance and mentoring throughout their entire secondary school career. The resources we expend for these students are given with a strong and pervasive expectation for hard work and success. The SPE Foundation is taking our cues from Ecotech Lab's experience and expertise in successfully working with these students. Mr. Young and the school administrators are the experts, and we follow their lead in program delivery, timing, incentives, expectations, interaction with schools, teachers, parents, and the students. I've learned a lot from Mr. Young. It's a tough love story. There was a student who was excelling in his lab, a real hands-on kid who knew he wanted to go to college for something in sustainability. So his material science research in bioplastics was totally engaging, but he was distracted by some other opportunities, some good opportunities he had, and possibly his grades in school were not as good as expected. Mr. Young called him out on it and said, "If you don't get your head in the game and raise your grades, you can't be in the lab anymore." Those were his rules. This is definitely a tough love call. Here is a kid who is doing the work, but only part of the agreed upon work. The young man did leave the lab for about a year with no hard feelings. He started a recycling club, the Green Team, at his school that led to an internship with a local recycler. But he did come back in his senior year, taking to heart the performance expectations by bringing up his grades. Mr. Young gives very clear direction to families and students. We expect you to perform. We are investing in you, and we expect our ROI to be strong. You will work to succeed. You will find your place in the world where your knowledge gives you the economic power and credibility that you have earned. And you will come back and be a witness to students who are starting where you started. This is a big responsibility. The young man in this story is graduating this year from Michigan State University with a degree in community sustainability. He is an undergraduate researcher at the university and has even done work in West Africa. He has taken his education and experience home to directly impact his community because this young man is one of our first Black Plastivan educators who has been serving students in Detroit this year. This is a successful example of the performance expectation. Mr. Young tells me that the schools he works with do not always expect as much as they could from students and families. But when they do, many students will decide they want to succeed in STEM and do the work. He also thinks this is a good lesson for his students and uses a business analogy to help them understand. He tells them, as a STEM professional, you might be given control of a budget. If one of your line items is for a project that repeatedly underperforms, he asks, do you expect that the same investment or funding will be forthcoming for the next year or the next? Not likely. Same goes for you, he tells them. What a great lesson. So let's get down to the pragmatic parts of our diversity, equity, and inclusion workforce development initiative. That's a mouthful. The beauty of this comprehensive program is that it will work with any group of students or any demographic that we are trying to engage. And the elements or activities could be easily modified to match funding and human capital resources and the specific needs of the students or veterans or single mothers or unemployed cooks. We have multiple touches with students for our DEI program, which include multiple days of Plastivideo instruction, a Wonders of Plastics essay contest to meld their language arts skills with their science skills, an after-school plastics club. Students as young as 12 who show success and drive are invited to take part in polymer or plastics-based research in the Ecotech Science at Work Lab. Polymer science and plastics research stipends are available for 8th through 12th graders. In Detroit, Arkema has made a 4-year commitment to fund these, as well as diversity scholarships for rising college freshmen. Graduates of the Ecotech Lab come back to mentor younger students. We're having a polymer plastic science fair, which is virtual this year, and an in-person plastics STEM fair in the summer to introduce students, parents, and teachers to the program. We aim to help students network at events and conferences, to help them be seen as valuable employees, and to give them confidence to navigate the plastics industry successfully. We are also seeking internship opportunities for high school and college students who have a strong drive and aptitude for plastics. And I think this is going to be one of our biggest challenges, and yet it's likely to yield the most fruit. Working at a university for several years, I witnessed how students gravitated towards careers in which they have experience and understanding. If we get them involved in plastics or polymers early on, we're more likely to keep them in our industry. If utilizing the Plastivan or Plastivideos and plastics education, starting with middle schoolers, doesn't seem like the right fit for you, I want to mention another example of a very successful workforce program that follows the think big, start small, stay in for the long haul ideal. Westminster Tool in Connecticut transformed their workforce issues from "we are aging out and have no one in the pipeline" into We have a long waiting list of 20-somethings who want to work for us. They actually have a waiting list of qualified young individuals who want to work at their tooling shop. Hillary Thomas, who chairs the SPE Foundation's marketing committee, is a VP and strategic leader at Westminster. About 10 years ago, the president realized the company was not going to be able to sustain growth in the coming years due to the age of the workforce. His long-haul vision was to change the culture of his company to match what would attract and excite young workers, and to consistently engage with the local schools through multiple events and programs. It took a while and considerable resources, which lessened earnings, but boy, is it paying off now. The company is a vibrant and shining example of what we can accomplish if we have a long-range investment mentality. You can find out more about Westminster Tool's program on YouTube. I highly recommend taking a look. It's really like saving for retirement. We can start later and miss all that compound interest and growth, or we can start right now. We, the SPE Foundation, the Plastivan program, chose to start now in Detroit and Central Florida. And we're in discussions with several other areas in the US, and are actually in the midst of a pilot program for students in Dakar, Senegal. This, of course, is being facilitated by our young Black Plastivan educator. Ecotech Lab invested in him, and he did the work. And now he's investing in students, not only in his hometown, but around the world. It's a great story, and we're excited and proud about it. I'm hoping you'll join the SPE Foundation and the Plastivan in supporting programs that can help us create a diverse and inclusive workforce, or can help you develop a reliable talent pipeline. It really is a long haul, and we need all partners to increase our impact. So let's dream big together. Our collaboration could be your first small step. I just want to thank you so much for your time today, and I'm looking forward to your questions.